Welcome back to the big weekend show. Well, another bump for Biden. President Biden bangs his head on the way out of Marine One hours after that tumble at the Air Force Academy graduation ceremony. Biden claiming he got sandbagged when he fell on the stage. Then there's the White House trying to explain that the fall was just totally normal. Here's Karine Jean-Pierre stumbling herself a bit. Listen.
Just, make sure we clear the record here. He tripped over a sandbag on the stage, and briefly he tripped and got up, and he got right back up and continued what he was there to do.
All right, no surprise here. The media was quick to downplay Biden's fall. CNN even reminding everyone he's fine in their headline. Similar reaction from his former press secretary, who excused the fall as totally normal behavior. Then she said that the fact that Biden is white and older is comforting to Republicans. Listen to this.
They can't make him extreme. Yeah. They can't really make him offensive. I mean, one, he's a white man who's older, so he is comfortable to many in their base. The many in their base. But I think also they have underestimated him. He's always been underestimated. He's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder because of that. That can serve you well. But I think they're trying to throw a lot of spaghetti up at the wall to try to take him down. And so far they haven't quite figured it out.
Okay, a lot to talk about with this one. So I just happened to be working on a weekday show, America Reports, this past week when this fall happened. So we covered it almost in real time, just a few minutes later. And what I said at the time was he had just shaken the hands of 900 cadets. So, okay, maybe he got a little dizzy and he fell, and maybe anybody would have fallen. He did get right back up, but in the context of the fact that he is an older president and there are already questions about his age and his stability, it just wasn't a good look. Mollie, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it was difficult to watch this, and I'm glad that he's okay and that he got up, fairly quickly. It's one of many such falls that we've seen, and even, later that day, he bangs his head coming out of Marine One. But more than the physical ailments, I think it's the mental situation that people are concerned about. And we have a media that will work very hard to make it sound like it's no big deal that Biden is having all these stumbles, physical or verbal. But it's actually something the whole world can see. And the whole world doesn't care what corporate media says about how it's all okay. They look, they see that he's feeble. They wonder who's really in charge. They are concerned about his mental health, his mental situation. And that's something that I think a lot of Americans are worried about, a lot of Democrats are worried about as they're thinking about who to have as their nominee.
Yeah, let's look at the way the media is covering it. Let's take a look at this headline from the Wall Street Journal. Biden's trip and fall, he says, I got sandbagged. Okay. And here's what it mentioned inside the article. It said, a fair question is whether Mr. Biden is now in the process of sandbagging Democrats or the country by running for re-election at his advanced age. Americans can be thankful Mr. Biden wasn't hurt this week. Would he get up so quickly if he fell in 2025? That's a great question. And, a lot of us might remember there was a moment several years back when President Trump had a little bit of difficulty walking down a little, like a few steps, and he was on a stage.
It was a ramp, right? It was a slippery ramp.
And so he walked a little gingerly there, and the media, they were all over him for this. But just this week, President Trump, he first reacted to President Biden's fall, and then he recounted how he was treated when he walked gingerly down this ramp. Let's listen.
It's sad. It's sad. It's not, they're representing, we are all representing the country. You become president. I said, I'm not falling. There's no way. So I'd go tippy-toe down the thing. That was a mistake because it didn't look so good. I even agree it was. But I got killed, and they never covered that speech.
So, Guy, let me go to you first on that quick reaction to President Trump. Does he have a point?
It's a very funny answer.
Yeah.
Right, which is one of his strengths.
Yes.
That's funny. He turned sort of this tough moment for Joe Biden into, let me talk about myself and the tippy toe. And the story is actually longer where he's like, oh, here's this big military guy with big boots. He's like, I was like, I'm going to hang on to you. It was highly entertaining. Look, I am less than half the president's age, and if I didn't see a sandbag right next to me and then started walking, I would trip and fall. I hit my head on the overhead bin at planes like far too often. I'm like, oh, right, that's there. These things happen. I think the problem, to Mollie's point, is when they happen often enough and there are already doubts about age and competence and that sort of thing. I mean, it's not just us talking. You look at ABC News, Washington Post polling, Fox News polling, a large majority of Americans have worries about the physical stamina and the mental acuity of the president. And then these types of videos get played over and over on top of it. That creates, fairly or unfairly, I think, a bit of a political problem for the Democrats.
Do we have a moment to bring up these headlines? Just here we go. These were the headlines when former President Trump fell. You can see we have Trump's halting walk down the ramp raises new questions. From the Washington Post, Trump tries to explain his slow and unsteady walk down a ramp at West Point. CNN, why the Donald Trump West Point ramp story actually matters. Tom, let me go to you on this. Can there be any more different headlines for Trump versus Biden?
Yeah,
Biden
every
falls,
headline,
yeah.
every single issue in America. Yeah. So, of course, it's true. But I don't want to be a hypocrite because I always say the president, obviously, he doesn't function very well. He's not very good when he does these, when he's on the stump, when he's out meeting people, because he's very old. It's very hard for old people to get around and do all those presidential things. He's also not that with it in the brain department, it seems like. But I would probably vote for a right-winger who was not that with it. I mean, Fetterman should not be in office, but the chief reason he shouldn't be in office is he's a left-wing Democrat. That's the problem I have with him. So, in that way, it's like the worst thing about Biden is the way he governs.
All right. Well, got to leave it right there. We're glad the president is okay.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.